Mr. Constantin von Hoffmeister.
Hello.
Nice to meet you in Moscow again.
It's my pleasure.
It's not the first time we met each other. And for the people who will watch this video, I can tell that I am Chris Roman. I am the coordinator of Euro-Rus and the coordinator of NSA. And that I met here Mr. Constantin von Hoffmeister the first time in 2007 on the Congress organized by the organization Atheneum. And I remember that Congress was a little heavy.
It's a bit
Because
controversial.
Mr. Constantin von Hoffmeister, he exposed a speech, and what I can say is that not so much people were agree with it.
That's true. That's
Mr.
true. Yes, I
Constantin von
remember.
Hoffmeister, I have maybe the question. Can you tell a little more about yourself? Who are you? And what? Second question. What are your political and geopolitical views?
I don't know. Well, my name's Constantin, as you already mentioned, and I'm originally from Germany, but I've lived in many different countries. I've lived in America for 10 years. I've lived in India for 3 years. I've lived in Uzbekistan for 1 year, doing various jobs. For example, in India, I was writing articles for English language newspapers. In Uzbekistan, I was teaching at an elementary school. Now I've been living in Russia, in Moscow, for the past 3 years, and I also teach. I teach English and German to business people here. And yes, about my geopolitical views, I would say that I favor the idea of Imperium Europa as opposed to petty nationalism. As opposed to petty nationalism.
What do you mean with petty nationalism?
Well, petty nationalism is, for example, like you have some German nationalists, for example. Revanchist nationalism, for example. If you're a German nationalist, you put the German nation above everything else, including Europe. And petty nationalism, for example, would be if you're a German nationalist and you say, East Prussia, which is now Poland, is German territory and you want it back. And you would even risk a war with Poland to get former territory back. And that's what I consider revanchist and petty nationalism, and I think it's completely out of place in the 21st century.
So, thank you for this explanation. But on the Congress of 2007, and believe me, I remember it very well, you had a speech, and it was when you spoke about the axis Jerusalem, Berlin, Moscow.
Right, yes.
If I have a good memory.
Yes, you're right.
And
yes.
You understand, you know that the most of people would not agree with you.
Right.
And the discussion after the speech and after the speeches of everybody, included with David Duke, who I know very well, they were very heavy.
Yes, yes.
But let's say we have to say that these discussions were heavy, but they stayed polite.
Yes.
No personal attacks, they stayed polite.
Yeah, it was nothing personal. It was stayed quite civil.
So,
yes.
And even I can honestly tell about myself that I am not always agree with all your points of view,
Right.
but I say it is your right to speak about it. And it is, that's what we say, freedom of speech means also let's speak the people with who you are not agree.
It's basically, yes.
Or partially not agree.
Yes.
So, it's a pleasure to hear from you now. What is your geopolitical view that where you spoke about on the Congress of 2007?
Well, at the Congress, my speech was about the axis Jerusalem, Moscow, Berlin, and the common socialist heritage of all three countries. For example, if you look at Germany fought a world war basically against Western plutocracy from 1939 to 1945. It was a socialist regime, a national socialist regime. And, well, in Russia, of course, you have the legacy of the Soviet Union that always was opposed to Western capitalism. And Israel was originally founded by Red Zionists, and it was originally to be a socialist state, and that's why the Soviet Union in the very beginning supported Israel. And the Soviet Union, as far as I know, was the first country that actually acknowledged Israel's existence and actively supported Israel in the war for its independence with weapons and so on. So is so all three countries, Israel, Russia, and Germany, have socialist roots, and I think the Russian people and the German people basically have socialist yearnings, meaning they're basically sick of capitalism, and the capitalist system, does not fit the mentality of the German and Russian people, and therefore I think like a national socialist system would be the ideal system for the Russians and the Germans. But we have to talk about this in an imperial context and not in a nationalist context, as I mentioned before, because what we need now is a united Europe, because all European countries face a common threat, and therefore they should not be opposed to each other based on nationalist biases or based on animosities that stem from certain historical grievances, you see? So therefore we need cooperation between the European nations, and ideally, in an ideal situation, would be to get rid of nations altogether and basically have not a Europe of nations, but a Europe of regions, sort of like a federation or an anti-imperialist empire based on, I would say, the Roman principle, where basically the provinces in ancient Rome, they had autonomy. The Romans did not interfere with the local traditions and the local cultures, and basically left the people alone as long as they paid allegiance to the empire. So I think it would be ideal to have a similar concept for Europe today, when we have an imperial Europe without nations. So that does not mean I want to destroy individual characteristics of individual nations or peoples. They would still be able to practice their traditions and worship their gods as they see fit, and have their music, have their food and everything. They would have complete autonomy, but they would be part of the empire, you see, because then you could establish sort of like the European brotherhood of peoples, or the brotherhood of European peoples, I should say.
So at this moment I'm not convinced that the state of Israel can help European empire.
Well,
because I see, when I see the map, I see that Israel is not in Europe. It's outside Europe.
Ah, yes, well, but only geographically.
In every case, Israel cannot be part of the European empire. That there can be bilateral contacts, okay, but I cannot see where Israel can help Europe.
Yeah, but if you argue like this, you can also argue that Vladivostok is not part of Europe, because geographically it's not. Geographically, like the large part of Russia is outside of Europe, and should that not also be included in the European empire? I think it should. And Israel, while geographically is not a part of Europe, I think culturally and ethnically it is. The same, and I could say the same for, say, Australia, Canada, America, Argentina, even maybe Chile, or South Africa. If you have a Boer republic again, then it could also be a part of the empire. It could be because you could have a global empire. Well, it starts with the European empire, but the ideal situation, of course, would be a wide empire spanning across the globe, like a wide girdle across the globe. I think Pavel Tolaev has similar ideas, the organizer of the conference. Well, that would be the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, as we all know, it's not possible at the moment because we have America, and America doesn't like the idea. Even though America is not the enemy, America is only sort of, let's say, a competitor to Europe. What do you say? I would argue that Israel is a part of Europe, ethnically and culturally. What do you say?
Let's say that from this point of view, I cannot agree. I agree on mine. But okay, we can discuss it. But because when we continue this discussion, I can say, if we say, for example, the Flemish people, Flemish people, or here the people around me, the Dutch people, or the German people,
right.
They have the right to say, my people first.
Right.
Eigen volk eerst.
I understand.
See?
Yes.
Isn't it so that in the Middle East, for example, Palestinian people, Iranian people, that they have the right to say this?
No, of course they do. Of course
And
they do.
if they say our people first, is there then not a clash between this, what we say, this Israeli immigration?
Mm-hmm. But
Is it not opposite?
Yeah, but I'm not sure what you're referring to. What are you referring to when you say Israeli immigration? Israeli immigration into where? Well, I'm not sure. What are you referring to?
You know that in 48 the Israeli state was made.
Yes.
We know by the community, worldwide community. We know
Yes.
it because
Yes.
alone they cannot do it.
Right.
But for example, to build this state, they destroyed I think 248 villages.
Yes,
No.
well, but it was
From people who lived there for
well, yes.
1,000 years.
Well, yeah, but you could say the same about the Jews that were basically driven out of Iraq and driven out of all the Arab countries during Israel's war for independence. And these Jews also have been living in these countries for thousands of years, or hundreds of years at least, and they were also chased out, and they also lost all their homes and their houses and all their belongings. And they never complained. They don't say we want our houses back in Iraq, we want our houses back in Iran.
So
They
you
were
say
chased out.
it's a pity it's like.
Of course, because
Yeah.
it was war, and that's what happens in war. You see, so people lose. You know, like I'm also not complaining that, for example, I'm not saying that Germany should get back East Prussia because it was former German territory and now it's Polish territory, because it's completely unrealistic to ask for it back. Because first of all, there are only Poles there now, and what are you going to do? Ethnically cleanse the Poles and resettle it with Germans? It's not possible.
But no.
And that's what happens when you start a war. You start a war that you can't win, you lose territory. That's what happens.
But what happened now, we see this fact, we see what happens in, for example, Brussels, we see what happens in Serbia, in Kosovo.
Right.
You see that this the Kosovar, they made an ethnic cleaning, and now Kosovo is an independent, let's say, somebody calls it Islamic state. No,
Right.
I call, for me the religion has nothing to do with this.
Right.
If Kosovo was a Buddhistic state, it was even the crime was as high as today.
Right.
What they do there. So we see that Kosovo today is I call it an independent legalized narcotica state.
Well, of course.
You know
Yes.
what,
Yeah,
so,
I agree with you.
But it's ethnic cleaning. It happens the last 10 years.
Right.
So it's a pity, but okay.
Yeah, but that's what happened. Yeah, but how does that relate to Israel?
They did it. So if one day, you know that historical, and then we continue to do
Right.
because but historical we can see that some leaders in history, and I'm not speaking about Hitler because he
Right.
was even not the first who thought about something, that there were plans to give the Jews a homeland,
Right.
like Gaza, for example.
Okay.
They
Yes.
refused it
Right.
because they wanted Israel.
Yeah, because
Jerusalem.
well, but I agree with the Jews because Israel is the ancestral homeland of the Jews because that's where the Jews
based on
originally
biblical
came from.
traditions.
Well, yes, but
historical.
well, yes, but yeah, well, the Bible has its roots in history though, and there are several there's a lot of historical evidence that the Jews did originate in the Middle East, in the region that is now Israel. Do you see? And if you consider that Christianity is basically an offshoot of Judaism, the entire but it is. You know, I don't. But it's not a matter of argument.
No,
It's obvious.
the Old Testament, yes.
Yes. Yeah, but the Old Testament is part of Christianity.
Christianity.
Like the Ten Commandments, that's in the Old Testament, for example.
Yeah, but,
and the creation myth and everything else, Adam and Eve. That's all part. Anyway.
But
all part.
today Christianity is closer to the old paganism than to some disease.
Really, I disagree. How is Catholicism closer to paganism? It incorporated a lot of pagan elements. No. I have nothing against Christians. I'm just saying that you're right. Yes, Christianity incorporated a lot of pagan elements, like the Easter eggs, Christmas tree, summer solstice, it's winter solstice, summer solstice, etc. Yes, the worship of Mother Mary, fertility cult, etc. Yes, no, I'm well aware of this. Yes, so they had to incorporate a lot of pagan elements to make it attractive to the European peoples because they were originally pagan. You see, but that doesn't change the fact that the religion itself is an offshoot of Judaism. Therefore, it is correct. It is correct to say that Europe was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Yes.
You know that
and that's why.
the word Judeo-Christian is even new.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's old or new, but it's correct in my opinion. Well, yes, I know it's fairly recent, but I think it's a correct term. I think it correctly describes the heritage of Europe, and that's why I think Israel is an integral part of Europe, precisely because of this legacy, because the cultural and spiritual foundation of Europe originated in what is now Israel, specifically Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is basically the spiritual center of Europe, or at least was the spiritual center of Europe for thousands of years. The entire wars, including the Crusades, were fought to liberate, Jerusalem from the Muslims. You see, So you cannot say that Israel has nothing to do with Europe. They're connected.
But then we can also say that about Turkey.
Yes, yeah, but yes, but no, but we can't because Byzantium is now occupied by Muslims.
That's right.
Yes, it's occupied by Muslims now. If we would liberate Byzantium from the Muslims, yes, then of course we should incorporate it into Europe. Yes, but it's liberated. Sorry, it's occupied, so we should have to liberate it first. But Jerusalem is already liberated. It has been liberated from the Muslims by the Jews for Europe, basically. Yes, I'd rather have Jews living in Jerusalem or Jews occupying Jerusalem than Muslims. Yes, because Muslims are the eternal enemy of Europe, while Jews are an integral part of Europe. Therefore, I think the fact that Israel or Palestine was ethnically cleansed was not necessarily a bad thing. It was probably a good thing for us, for the Jews, and for Europe. Yes, or for European culture, I should say.
You know that when the Crusades attacked Jerusalem,
Yes, I know.
The first king, today some people will call him Belgian because he's from Brabant. And you know that, yes, it's well known that he cleaned up the city from Muslims on a not so nice way, and that he also cleaned the city from the Jews.
Well, of course, yes, that's true. Yes.
And do you refer to that time?
Yeah, well, I'm referring to the time. Well, I was referring to the time before because you were saying that Israel is not Europe and therefore it should not be part of any European superstructure. And my argument was that Israel is an integral part of Europe for cultural and spiritual and civilizational reasons because it was the birthplace of Christianity, and Christianity is basically the spiritual foundation of Europe. And the fact that a lot of crusaders also massacred the Jews doesn't change the fact that Christianity in itself is a Jewish religion, yes, or at least an offshoot of Judaism. Yes.
Yes, I think on this point of view, I think we'll never be agree, but it's okay. It's
we can agree to disagree.
Yes, we are agree with that, that we are okay. But okay. Thank you for the explanation. But then I will ask you another question, if I may. You live a few years already in Moscow.
Yes.
So what can you tell me to the Western people who will look at this, watch this video? What can you tell me about who lives in Moscow? The Russians, are they all animals? Are they all wild monkeys, like what we can see? Are they all drunk here? Did you see bears in the streets?
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, of course, there's all the cliches, you know.
For example, here is a wedding, here is a wedding behind us. You know, Russian wedding is with a lot of noise.
Yes.
Stop.
You just pause it real quick. No, I remember. Okay, let's go.
So what is your experience about Germany? Oké?
Ja, hij staat aan.
Nu vervolgen we dus het antwoord op de vraag die ik gesteld heb, we waren eventjes onderbroken. Oké, 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, yeah, living in Russia, it has its positive sides and has its negative sides. You know, first of all, because I'm from Germany, I would say that it's a fact that in general, I think Russians are very pro-German, they're very friendly towards Germans, they never have any problems like in other European countries when they, you know, sometimes, like for example, if you go to the Netherlands, sometimes they're very anti-German, you know, because they have like hang-ups because of World War II and they have inferiority complex and so on. Some people say, but there's no such thing in Russia, even though Russia suffered like no other country, you know, in World War II. Nevertheless, the Russians are always very friendly, very open, very pro-German. Every time I go to a bar and I meet some Russians, they find out I'm from Germany. I'm always invited to drink vodka with them and have a chat and everything. And yes, I'm teaching English in Germany and Moscow. And the German language is the second most popular language. It's the second most popular foreign language in Russia after English. Because I think Germany is basically Russia's #1 trading partner as well. So it's very much needed in business. But yeah, like everyday life, I'd say, yeah, well, the average Russian, you know, is not much different, I would say, than the average European. But I would say that in general, I say Russians are more superstitious than Western Europeans. Like, for example, you can't shake somebody's hand through a door frame, you can't pass something through a door frame. If you go to a metro station and you have like statues or sculptures of, I I don't know, animals. You always have to rub the nose or the palm because it's good luck. Yeah, also very superstitious, you know. I wonder if it stems from the fact that most Russians were peasants before, so it's like sort of like peasant mentality, maybe possibly. And yeah, well, the problem, alcohol is a problem, I would say, and we definitely do see more drunks here than in Western Europe. That is unfortunately true. Yes. So yeah, alcohol is a big problem. So the Russians like to drink, but of course the Germans like to drink as well. So I can't really judge them for it. Yes. And yeah, what else? Anything else? What else?
So I see I see a few years ago and today I see the difference. I see that Moscow is more cleaner than 10 years ago.
Well, that's definitely true. Yes. Yeah, you know. Yeah.
Kind of,
No, Moscow is definitely developing. I was here the first time in Moscow in 1995. Yeah, it's like the difference between day and night, basically. It's because there was nothing. It was like a wasteland almost in 1995. So it is developing, yes. But at the same time, it is not developing as well as it could because of corruption. Yes, that's the problem. Because a lot of money is siphoned off because of corruption, basically. So a lot of money is lost.
I heard in the newspaper that from January till now we are July 2011, from January till now already $1,000 billion have flight away out of the country.
Yeah, well I believe
it's oil money that is going to, I don't know, banks in the States or Switzerland, I don't know.
Yes. Cayman Islands and so on. Yes, it's a problem. It's a big problem.
Is it possible to find a solution?
Yeah, well, I think...
Or do we have to ask the comeback of somebody like Mr. Stalin?
Yeah, I think you know, unfortunately, I think that it's a very problematic issue because I think corruption is the #1 problem in Russia. Because all the problems that you have in Russia basically all have their roots in corruption. And the corruption is everywhere, from top to bottom, left, right. It's like everywhere. It's ridiculous. So what can you do? So yeah, well, probably you need another Stalin to weed it out. Yeah, harsh measures. Yes. Maybe bring back the Gulag system. You know, to send people. You know, like take bribes. You know, send them to the Gulag. You know. I don't think the idea is too far-fetched because how else are you going to get rid? How else are you going to deal with this problem of everybody taking bribes and everybody being so corrupt, like especially government officials and police officers and so on, you know, because the country is losing so much money and it is basically not developing as fast and as well as it could. It is developing, like you can see, Moscow is developing and it is developing fast, but could be more.
When I see the cars in the streets here, 10 years ago, I saw one big Mercedes and around everywhere from the old Ladas and old Jigulis, the cars who will never pass through in the West the technical checkup.
Oh yes, yeah. The TÜV in Germany, yes.
But now it's changed.
Yeah, I know.
I see a lot of people here has really nice cars.
Yeah, the problem
means that there is money in Moscow.
Yeah, but the money is unevenly spread, I think, you know, because I mean the middle class is growing, but I think like if you talk about salaries, the salaries are really, really low, you know. Like I think the majority of people, like even if you have like a job at say at a multinational company in a say like you're like a financial analyst at a multinational company and you only make like say 40,000 rubles a month, which is 1,000 euros, and a police officer now makes about 35,000 rubles a month. But it's for a city like Moscow where the rent for like a 2-bedroom apartment in the outskirts in the suburbs already costs 30,000 a month. You know, I mean, how do people live? You know, I really wonder sometimes how do people live if you make 40,000 a month. And you have to pay rent, you have to buy food, you have to buy clothes, etc. How do they do it? I don't know, it's very hard.
Is it possible that a lot of people that have a second job? One official, one not so official, and that the real
salary?
The real salary is higher than they say, than they tell.
It's possible. Well, but I don't know, because I have a lot of friends here, and as far as I know, they only have one job. And I know the salaries because in Russia it's not even polite basically to ask people how much money you make as opposed to the West. And yeah, talking about cars, yes, but it's true that you see a lot more good cars on the streets is also a problem because now you have too many cars and now you have too much traffic. And the infrastructure basically can't hold so many cars, so it's a complete gridlock basically when you're in traffic jams for 3 hours. Yes, I don't know, but what can you do? And the problem is, I think also the problem is that Russia is too centralized because most of the development takes place in Moscow and maybe St. Petersburg. And while the rest of the country is basically neglected.
There's the plans, you told me, the plans, and I heard about it, that Moscow wants to develop.
Yeah. No, twice as large. Because I read an article that Moscow basically wants to be twice as large. I mean, already now, I think 10% of the population of Russia lives in Moscow. And I think 90% of all the money of Russia is in Moscow. And I think 5% is in St. Petersburg. So I don't know. That's a problem. The same with France. If you have such a centralized country. I don't know. What do you think?
I think Russia will have to find an answer on a lot of problems, on a lot of questions.
Yes.
Because one of the questions that we can ask now is, and I ask this question to a lot of people because I want to understand that we have two ideas. We have the idea of the in this case Russian imperium.
Right.
It's an imperium with a lot of people, all people from Dagestan, from Chechnya, from Bashkiria, even to the not far from China.
Right.
And on the other side, we have what we call in Russia nationalnost.
Right, I understand.
That means we are Russian and proud to be it.
Right.
A Russian is not Chechen, a Russian is not Ukrainian.
Well, it's ethnic Russians,
basically.
basically. Right.
And in fact, it's a very big choice
right.
what to do. Because if the Russians become here minority and the Russian Empire is led, for example, by Tatars or by Chechens,
right.
It will Russia, but it will be another Russia.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem. What can you do?
What is your solution?
Well,
what do you think? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. What I think. Okay, so now you have Russia. Russia is very big, and basically, I would say not Russia, but the Russian Federation. Like not Ruski, but Rossiyski. Basically, like the Russian Federation is basically a multi-ethnic country. It's a multicultural country, basically. It's multi-faith. You have many religions. You have Buddhists. You have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Jews, etc. So it's definitely multi-faith and multi-ethnic because you have Russians, you have Tatars, you have Chechens, etc. You see? So, and that's a fact. And you have like whole territories inside the Russian Federation which are not Christian, which are not ethnically Russian, by majority, like Tatarstan, for example, or Kalmykia, and so on. So, but what are you going to do? Like you either accept the fact that Russia is a multicultural country and live with it, or if you want an ethnically pure, homogeneous, ethnic Russian state, then you basically have to divide Russia and split up Russia. There's no other way. Because it's like a lot of Russian nationalists complain that there are a lot of Chechens in Moscow. They don't like the Chechens living in Moscow. But at the same time, they support their government when it fights against the Chechen separatists. And for me, that's a double standard. I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because you can't say oh, Chechnya must be a part of the Russian Federation. It's not allowed to secede, but at the same time, you don't want these people in Moscow. But why? Why not? They're Russian citizens because Chechnya is part of the Russian Federation. So why shouldn't they have the right to come to Moscow? So either you let Chechnya go, and then we have the right to say, okay, what are you doing in Moscow? Or you can't complain, and that's basically it. You either split up Russia or you accept it. I know, that's what I think.
Or you can import the system of what we call apartheid.
Yeah, but how would that work?
This
right.
is a system that we saw it in South Africa.
Right.
This is the system that works not so much.
Yeah, but it didn't work in South Africa. That's why it collapsed, I think. Because yeah, exactly. And then how would you do it in Russia? It would also be boycotted.
In Russia is that Russia can live alone.
Right.
Russia can live alone without the world.
Right.
They can do it because they have territory, they have food, energy, they have everything. In South Africa, it was a problem.
Right. Okay.
So that they can they can do it.
Right.
But it's a very. I think this is a question that will become more and more on the forefront.
Exactly.
So
well, especially now. I think this question is also closely connected with the demographic question. because ethnic Russians are losing. Basically, the population is shrinking. The ethnic Russian population is shrinking by the hour, basically, and it's a very grave situation because if the population is shrinking in such a vast territory, what are you going to do? And right next to it, you have China with, I don't know, almost 1.5 billion people, and they're pressing into Siberia. I don't know.
I saw
all problems.
I saw in newspaper that in 2050 Russia will have, they tell, 110 million people.
Yes, and now they have 140.
10 years ago it was 150,000 million.
Yeah, now it's 140.
Plus 110 million people will not, it doesn't mean 110 million Russians.
No, it's basically,
balance
yeah.
also will
It probably means like, I don't know, 80 million Russians maybe, and 30 million, I don't know, something else, yes, Tatars, etc. Yeah, so it's a
plus all
problem.
this immigration from China.
Yes.
In Siberia.
It's
hard to protect it.
What can you do? And how can you protect the borders if you don't have the people and if you don't have the manpower? How can you even protect it if you have such a massive superpower right next door with a ridiculously large population? I don't know, so I don't know, what's the solution? It's really hard to say. Like, I don't know, implement some sort of like incentives for people to have more babies, basically. Like, what real incentives?
The government they give now since a few years money for each second or third child.
Yeah, but not a lot of money, because now I've been reading how much money they give, and it's only very little, and the amount is so small that they give is not a real incentive. It's not a real incentive, even in the regions, and even in Moscow they barely pay anything. Well, they do pay, but it's very little you get from the government. So the incentive is not very good. So they really, I mean, it's a real. I think that's also like demographic crisis and corruption are the two most pressing issues, I think, in Russia, in my opinion.
So we see, in fact, we can conclude here that Western Europe, the western part of Europe, and the central European part, the central part of Europe, and the Russian part of Europe, that we need each other.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
And I think that we can agree on the point that we have to fight for a great Europe, from Gibraltar just off the western.
Yes.
On that point we are agreeing.
Yes, I agree.
And we had, you know, in Europe we had a lot of wars between. I call it almost civil war.
Yeah, fratricidal wars, brothers' wars.
Yeah, brothers' war.
Yes,
yeah. And I think on this moment we never may have again war between European people.
Right.
Never.
Right.
At that point we are agreeing.
Well, yes.
So?
And and one more thing. Yeah, if you talk about Russia and say Western Europe, would be a great symbiosis, because Russia has all the resources, natural resources, and Western Europe, like say Germany, France, etc., has basically a technical knowledge and a technical know-how. And I think the two is like it's the perfect symbiosis. Like if you have Russia and Europe together, to create Euro-Russia, it would be ideal. And you could even resettle people from Western Europe, Russia, and so on. So it could be a great project.
I think the best symbol we can have here is that the two-headed eagle.
Yes, exactly. East and West.
One is East and West, both together. And I see it so, if you are okay. That is Eastern Europe, the Slavic Europe, is the soul. Because they're very emotional here, the dusha and the soul. And Western Europe is the ratio. And if both find equilibrium,
yes, that's what we need, the balance.
Then we can have, I think, a really good empire.
Of course, yes. No, I agree. I'm in full agreement with you. Yes.
I don't know if you want say some last word to the people in the West.
I would say Magna Europa is Patria Nostra. Yes. So we need the great empire from basically from Gibraltar to Vladivostok, with the double-headed eagle with its wings watching over it. And that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Constantin von Hoffmeister, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.